Welcome to another episode of Elephants in the Boardroom, the podcast that helps you to look at the trends that are shaping the world around us. My name is Graeme Codrington, and as always, I'm joined by my colleague,
Dean van Leeuwen. Elephants in the Boardroom is brought to you by our friends at Achilles, who are a sustainable supply chain risk management company. Achilles supports the world's biggest companies to create and maintain ethical, sustainable, and transparent supply chains. While we navigate our way through the elephants in the boardroom, Achilles are leading the way, helping businesses manage risk and opportunities associated with many of these grey elephants. If you are a person who's interested in the impact of change on your supply chain or your ESG strategy, it's worth speaking to Achilles. So head over to achilles.com.
Now, hopefully this isn't your first episode with Dean and myself, and you know a little bit about what we mean when we say the elephants in the boardroom. These are big forces that will have a major impact on the world around us. In fact, they are already impacting the world around us. That's why the elephants are already in the room. But most of our clients, most of the companies that we work with, most of our friends are not taking them seriously. We know about them, but are they impacting our business strategies, and are we seeing the opportunities that they bring? So as always, we're going to start by having a look at what Dean and I have been seeing over the last month or so, and some examples of these elephants. And then today we've got a fantastic interview with one of the world's leading mining CEOs. We're really great to be able to speak to Neal, and we'll introduce him a little bit later. So, Dean, let me start. This month, I came across a set of statistics and then jumped down a rabbit hole of note. Some statistics came out from one of our favorite websites. It's called visualcapitalist.com, and we'll put links in the show notes to this data. But they shared a number of different statistics from around the world of the number of young adults who are still living at home. Now, there are different definitions of a young adult. If we look at people aged 18 to 28, globally, it's more than 50% of 18 to 28-year-olds are still living with their parents. If you push that up a little bit further, because that might still be the end of high school, secondary school, and into university and college. But if you look at ages 25 to 35, you're still looking at nearly 30% globally. Different countries have this differently. So if you look at the Nordic countries, they're down to sort of 5-6% already when you're in your late 20s. But across Europe, if you look at Croatia, Montenegro, Italy, Slovakia, Serbia, they're all nearly 70% plus. The United States, it varies very much according to state. It's linked to something we'll talk about in a second, house prices. The higher the prices of entry homes, the more likely it is that those young people stay at home. So New York, California, you can imagine a lot more young adults staying at home. And then if you look around the world, you see this maybe linked to culture. So in Brazil, it's quite high. In some parts of Africa, quite high. But two things, Dean, seem to be driving this. The one is culture. And that, I suppose, accounts for some of this. Some cultures, young people leave quickly. Other cultures, like maybe Mediterranean cultures, are a lot more comfortable with multi-generational households. But country to country, regardless of the underlying culture, more young people, significantly more young people are living at home than they did 20 years ago or 40 years ago. And the research shows that the main driver behind this is the cost of living, especially the cost of a starter home. And I think both you and I are probably of an age when our first homes, even in our own lifetimes, we realize what we paid for our first homes and then what we pay for that same home today. And even given inflation and cost of living increases, it's just dramatically increased. So it's a really, really interesting view of the world, a really, really interesting thing to think about. It links into our grey elephants of an aging population, but I also think it probably links in to issues around inequality, big squeezes, and possibly, Dean, and with this, I'll hand it over to you for your comments on this. I think it might also be, there's a bit of rising rage, a little bit of the simmering pot there that I'm guessing young people would prefer to move out and prefer to get onto the housing ladder early. But in most parts of the world, that's more difficult than it's ever been.
Yeah, absolutely, Graeme. And it's, I think it has important implications for businesses. And you're right, the big squeeze is definitely a grey elephant that this trend sits into. And it's important that we see these weak signals and think about what the impact and what they're going to have on our businesses and society and how they're changing the world. So these trends, I think, are interesting in the sense of, well, what does it mean for younger populations and older populations? What does it mean for your workforce? What does it mean for, you're paying these young professional people salaries that, benchmarked and they may be good salaries. But yeah, I think when you mentioned us starting out, house pricing was probably around about a third of our income. And now it's well over 50%, sometimes even higher. I think if I look to my parents, I think about what they were earning and the price of houses back then, and it was probably about 10, 15% of their income. This has been a gradual, slow, creepy sort of grey elephant, and it's one that's well known, but it's becoming even more and more impactful. I'm concerned about my son, who's now he's 11 years old, and how's he going to be able to afford a house? If we're able to, I think we will probably help him get onto that first step later of owning a house, but we may not be able to. Depends on what the price of housing is at that point. And there are many people who can't afford to help their children. And then you're stuck with children coming back sort of as boomerang. They go out into the world and then they realize how expensive it is and they come back. But I don't know, Graeme, what are your thoughts around the opportunities here and what this means for families? It's probably a fairly recent trend that we've owned our own houses. I mean, historically, you lived in a multi-generational household with children, grandchildren, grandparents and parents all living under the same roof. The idea that we are entitled to our own home is a fairly new phenomenon, and I think that's perhaps maybe we're seeing the circle sort of come around again. What are your thoughts here, Graeme?
No, look, that historical reference is accurate. As I said, this has been quite a rabbit hole for me this last week. I'm nervous that we could make this a 3-hour episode just on this topic. But yeah, 120, 150 years ago was the last time that this many young people were living with their parents. But that was a very different world and a very different culture. So maybe this is further evidence of the shift, and maybe it even links into our multipolarity elephant in the boardroom, because it's a shift in global geopolitical systems and structures that has given us capitalism with a middle class, and part of showing you a middle class was that you owned your own standalone house. And I mean, that's just not true in certain parts of the world, and it's not possible now. But you're absolutely right. One of the other parts of the elephants in the boardroom viewpoint is to look for the opportunity, not just to identify the crisis, but the opportunity. The opportunity is obviously, I think, a political one, because this is really often in most countries related to politics. How much land do we allocate for development? Do we allow development? Do we allow development of lower cost entry level housing? And in many countries, government could do something about that. And I honestly think that some of the rage against governments last year can be directly linked to this, that there's not enough housing stock in the countries, and then there's too much control over the housing stock, too many regulations in place. A new book that I'm still working through, we might talk about it next month, is by Ezra Klein, the New York Times columnist, called Abundance, in which he's arguing that progressives and leftists need to do something about this. So maybe we'll come back to that. The opportunity for business, though, Dean, strikes me as this. I was just thinking, just scrolling in my head through radio, TV, print, online, internet advertising that might have advertised any form of product or service aimed at a 28-year-old still living with their parents. You know, whatever. A home loan, a computer option, internet splitting, I don't know, an app that will help you to manage household finances. I don't know. I can't even imagine what products and services need to be offered. And in that, there must be an opportunity, because absolutely there must be certain things that a 27-year-old living at home with their parents could make their life better. Somebody must have products and services to offer these people, and somebody must be able to speak their language so that it doesn't sound like, and now I'm even maybe showing my default setting, that it doesn't sound like you failed, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. I mean, I have a 26-year-old daughter who's still on my payroll, and I don't see her as a failure. I see this as what we do together as a family for all of us to live our best lives. But now, how does that come across in product, services, and then advertising? So it's probably beyond my pay grade to have a specific example, but any company where that might be one of your target markets, it's open season, open space, because nobody else is marketing to them.
I think you're spot on, Graeme. There's a need to rethink or reimagine life stages. We often, marketers will think about, how do we target the empty nesters? That's a fast dwindling segment of consumers, given these trends. There are even products for parents who want to help their children to kind of leave. So just reflecting on the conversation, Leo, my child, has a sign in his bedroom that says, "Happiness is discovering free Wi-Fi," and maybe a way to encourage him to leave the nest is to remove that free Wi-Fi. Because, as you move back home, you have free laundry, free food, petrol tank in the car gets filled every now and again. It's not that bad.
If I had had that option when I was 23, 24, I'm pretty sure I would have taken it. Look, in no way do I think these young people are making a mistake. If you can get free housing, free lodging, get the laundry done automatically, I mean, you'd be mad not to do it. So, this fits under big squeezes. It fits under multipolarity. It fits under aging and demographic shifts. But if we get it wrong, and if we don't recognize the power of this little data point of young adults staying at home, I think it also could lead to rising rage. So this is, for me, it was a wonderful example. I hope it works for everybody else as an example of just how this elephants in the boardroom radar actually works. And a data point can then unlock insights and opportunity thinking. So that's mine for the month. Dean, what's yours?
Let me build on, we closed off there on the rising rage. And I want to talk about a data point that I think is fueling this rising rage. And there are politicians, law enforcement agencies and so on that are probably looking at this trend as a bit of a win. My concern is that it's kind of pushing us below the surface. And when you push rage below the surface, it just tends to bubble up and explode. What stood out for me, and it's an article in the BBC that's titled "How Just Stop Oil Was Policed to Extinction." And Just Stop Oil, probably one of the most recognizable climate activist groups in the UK over the past few years. Essentially, they're saying they're calling it quits. After 3 years of soup throwing, traffic disruption on the M25 and high-profile protests, they've decided to stop. And they're claiming that this is a win. They're saying that the government is committed to ending new oil and gas licenses. But behind the scene, we're seeing that members are admitting that legal and policing pressures have made it impossible to carry on. The shift in protest laws has been significant. New laws mean that you can be arrested simply for planning to cause disruption. Some activists have received lengthy prison sentences, and we've seen a complete reframing of what public protest means. Just Stop Oil, they've essentially been regulated out of existence, but they're not going to disappear. They're just going underground. Graeme, you and I had our teenage years growing up in South Africa in the 1980s. Sorry for giving away your age. But we saw the impact of the apartheid regime forcing the ANC and Nelson Mandela underground. The protest or the issues people are passionate and angry about, they don't go away, do they, Graeme? What are your thoughts on this?
No, look, I grew up obviously as a white privileged South African, and to my later teenage years and into my young adulthood was radicalized by those protests. Yeah, when people want change, and I would go further to say need change, as they did against apartheid, and as I do think we do need now against a number of things. We need change in terms of climate change activism. We need change in terms of the way we treat immigrants and refugees, and we need change in the way we deal with LGBTQI people, for example. People who are passionate about this, yes, we might be labeled as leftists and progressives and, woke and whatever other, adjectives people want to throw against us. But in the end, if you don't listen to protest, especially to students. I mean, it's almost you and me, the DNA of a student is protest. Almost, if they don't have anything to protest against, give them something, right? Because it's almost the nature of the game. America knows this. The Europe knows this. In fact, every country in the world knows this. So I think you're spot on there that you can bring a little bit of a heavy-handed, I'd even go so far as to say in some countries, now let me say more America these days, there's almost I'll use the word fascist, kind of approach to sort of clamping down on university students and all the rest. I know that Just Stop Oil included people in their 80s and 90s chaining themselves to barricades and so on. But yeah, you can police it off the streets, but it doesn't go away. I agree with you entirely. So now let me throw the question back at you that you threw at me. Where's the business opportunity? Because this one doesn't feel like it's got an obvious business opportunity. This protest brought to you by big brand name, I mean, how do you see a business opportunity in sort of allowing protest?
Before I go there, before I answer that question, I think let's just think a little bit more broadly, because you're right. This protest, this anger, it finds new pathways. We can see the extreme pathway, and we've seen this globally. So you take in the US, a man called Luigi Mangione assassinates a healthcare CEO. I mean, that's like the extreme. And his anger or motive, well, it's anger of the insurance industry's role in denying, delaying, deposing, essentially rejecting the health insurance claims. And what's striking, I think, about was the reaction that tens of thousands of people online expressing an understanding or support for why Mangione killed. We've got the Trump administration cutting funding to Harvard as a response to pro-Palestinian protests and DEI programs. Again, policies are being used to shut down dissent. We're seeing this pattern emerge. Formal protests is being constrained, and informal action, sometimes disruptive, sometimes dangerous, is starting to rise on its place. So you're right, Graeme. What's the implications for? Well, I think we can understand the implications. Is there's disruption. You're seeing protests against Tesla, and people are breaking windows and throwing paint into Tesla distributing centers and so on. So how do we turn this into an opportunity? And I think for leaders, business leaders, there's three things that you need to be thinking about. The first is, are there genuine channels for dissent within your own organization? Now, we're not talking about surveys or just about surveys or town halls, but real forums where concerns can be raised and taken seriously. The second thing I think is, are you tracking the shift from visible to invisible risks, underground movements, viral narratives, sudden waves of online backlash? They can build out of sight and they can hit really hard. The third one, I think, is, are you using moments of tension as an opportunity to engage and evolve your own business, your own organization? Some of the most forward-thinking businesses are bringing critics into co-creation spaces. They're inviting them to help shape policy, products, and purpose. So let me give you two examples here, Graeme, just bring this to life, I guess. So McDonald's, okay. They've been under sustained pressure from animal rights groups for years. And instead of ignoring it, or instead of continuing to ignore it, they've now brought critics to the table, brought them into collaboration spaces. And this has led to the redesign of animal handling systems, new welfare audits across their supply chain. And eventually the decisions have phased out controversial practices like sort of gestation crates and battery cages. So I think what began as a protest outside of their restaurants has become a driver of supply chain transparency, product reformulation, and even brand resilience. Microsoft is another great example. In the face of growing concern over the misuse of AI, especially facial recognition and algorithmic bias, Microsoft took a proactive approach. They brought in external activists and academics to shape their response on AI principles. And as a result, they've limited the use of facial recognition tech before legislation requires it. They've published clear commitments on fairness and transparency, and they've even pushed for stronger regulation, even when it meant it wasn't in their short-term commercial interest. And by listening to criticism, they are positioning themselves, Microsoft is positioning themselves as a leader in ethical AI development, influence in policy, and earning public trust. And you can't buy that level of competitive advantage. These approaches really encourage leaders to move from a defensive risk management posture to proactively purpose-driven strategies, I guess transforming these grey elephants into engines of innovation and resilience.
Yeah, listen, those are great examples. Maybe a flip side example is Elon Musk just a few days ago announcing that he's had enough of being in government and being harangued by protesters, and he's going to go back to Tesla that's busy bleeding at the moment. Now, whether or not the damage is too far done, whether or not he himself is the problem rather than his brand, that remains to be seen over the next few weeks. But at least, if we can give him a bit of credit, at least he's realized he's got to take this seriously, right? He can't just say these protests are going to go away, because they're not. And companies from Nestle to Starbucks know the story, right? Yeah.
And isn't that the point? We know about the impact of protests. Elon Musk would have known there was going to be a backlash to his behavior and his approach as part of Doge, but it was ignored, and he ignored it. We've seen the impact, and now he's having to fight fires. Whereas if you'd given more consideration, more thinking to what the implications are, it might have been better managed.
Absolutely. So top tips this month from us: chat to the kids. And by kids, we mean the 25 to 35-year-olds who's still living at home. And don't ignore the protesters. And we're quite serious about that advice. Now, Dean, as we have been doing on all of these episodes, this month I have a quiz for you. And the quiz this month is, I am going to give you 3 quotations, and I need you to match the quotation to the person who made it. I decided to have a look. Pope Francis has recently passed away, so I thought I'd take a quote from Pope Francis. Then I had a look, which other big major world leaders passed away in the last sort of few months or so. We can go back a few months to Jimmy Carter. So if you're taking notes, Dean, Pope Francis is your first person. Jimmy Carter, the ex-president of America, is your second. And then I thought we'll just throw in Queen Elizabeth II from England as our third recently departed world leader. Just by the way, Dean, quick cheeky note. Jimmy Carter passed away a day or two after voting for Kamala Harris. He had turned 100 and he had said to people, I want to be alive to cast a vote for Kamala Harris. He passed away before he knew that Donald Trump had defeated her. Queen Elizabeth famously passed away 2 days after meeting Liz Truss, possibly the worst UK Prime Minister of all time. And of course, Pope Francis passed away about 9 hours after meeting J.D. Vance. So anyway, that could have been your quiz. Who killed these three people? Allegedly.
Don't meet people in high governmental positions, I think.
Exactly, yeah. But the lawyers are saying in my ear, please say allegedly. Okay. But here we go, Dean. 3 quotations. You tell me which is which. Here we go. First quote, I'll read all 3 and then you can tell me who you think said which. The first is, let us not be afraid to say it. We want change, real change, structural change. Okay, end of quote. Second quote. Right. Religion and culture are much in the news these days, usually as sources of difference and conflict, rather than for bringing people together. But the irony is that every religion has something to say about tolerance and respecting others. End of quote. And then the third quote is, the bond of our common humanity is stronger than the divisiveness of our fears and prejudices. Okay. Quick recap. The first one is, let's not be afraid, we want change. The second one are about religion and culture are in the news, but every religion has something to say about tolerance and respecting each other. And the third one, the bond of our common humanity is stronger than the divisiveness of our fears and prejudices. Okay. Who said the first one? Dean, let us not be afraid to say we want change.
All right, this is a really good quiz, and I'm a little bit nervous. I might get them all wrong, but let me take a stab. Let's see if we can use.
Look, this is a mean quiz, Dean. I mean, honestly.
So, okay, the first one about needing real change. I'm going to go with Pope Francis here because I think there is a realization that the Catholic Church needs to change. There's some key indicators that we're seeing populations, attitudes, values towards church shifting. A lot of that is shifting south, whereas interesting, I think I heard all of the popes have been European or very recently, but
he was the first non-European for about 1,000 years, yeah.
But we've never had an African pope, have we?
Not yet.
Not yet. So I'm going to go with one real change, Pope Francis.
Okay. I'm not going to tell you right or wrong yet because I want to give you your second choice, yeah?
I'm going to go with Queen Elizabeth II, talking about the need for tolerance.
Yeah, religion and culture are say a lot about tolerance and respect, yes, which means Jimmy Carter goes for the common bond of humanity.
Yeah, that's it.
Spot on. I am impressed, Mr. Van Leeuwen. Absolutely. I don't think I would have got that. I mean, obviously, you know why I chose them. All 3 of these leaders were committed to seeing change happen. And we can argue that's not the point of the quiz. We can argue about how successful they were at actually bringing change and so on. But at least in their words and in many of their actions, they were all committed to sort of expanding the way we think and to do this. So, I mean, it was a pretty mean quiz. Spot on. Nicely done. Yeah, well done. I'm actually very impressed. But wouldn't it be great if we had more leaders like them, right? I think all of them were deeply respected, all of them flawed, and none of them succeeded in achieving what I think they wanted to achieve in their lives, which is a reminder to all of us, keep working hard, don't stop. All of them, I think, committed to, I think, Dean, what you and I and Tomorrow Today, our company, is committed to. We believe we can build a better future, and we believe it's up to us to try and to give it a go.
Well, Graeme, so let me introduce you to our next interview. Is with Neal Froneman, the CEO of Sibanye Stillwater. Sibanye Stillwater are a PGM group company, a miner, who have operations in several continents and operations globally. And we've been working with Neal and his executive team for over 3 years now. And we started off working with them around using the grey elephants to help them understand the changes that were happening in front of us. And Neal, in the interview, shares some of his great insights and how the grey elephant model assisted them and their business in developing their strategy and how they thought about the world. But more than just being prepared for these sort of great forces of disruption, but actually taking advantage of them. And one of the great things that he says in the interviews, he says that his leadership team have learned how to dance with the grey elephants. They now dance with the grey elephants and they take advantage of them and they position their business phenomenally well. Graeme, I know you weren't able to join us for this interview, but I hope you enjoy listening to it. And Neal has some great insights about how leaders can think through their supply chains and their strategy and their business and their ESG commitments and what the grey elephants really mean for them. Right. Our guest today is Neal Froneman, the outgoing CEO of Sibanye Stillwater, a multinational mining and metal group with a portfolio and operations across numerous continents. Welcome, Neal. It's great to have you on Elephants in the Boardroom podcast.
Thanks, Dean, and I'm very happy to be here.
It's great having you. Over the past few years, your leadership team has engaged with the Grey Elephant framework to support strategic thinking and long-term positioning. Now, today I'm keen to explore how the model has been applied within Sibanye Stillwater and the lessons you have learned. Now, we are living in interesting times. And everywhere we look, the grey elephants of change are stampeding. And of course, we're having this conversation at a time of increased geopolitical disruption. As we record, Donald Trump's so-called Liberation Day marks a significant break in global trading order. And in that context, the foresights offered by the grey elephants or the elephants in the boardroom, because Neal, as you know, and as our listeners know, the grey elephants are defined as highly probable, high impact, yet largely ignored forces of change. And with so much change in the world, grey elephants are more relevant than ever. So let's dive in. Neal, take us back to when Tomorrow Today Consulting first introduced you to the grey elephant model, which I think was about 3.5 years ago now. What resonated most with you at the time? And why did you feel it was important for Sibanye Stillwater to understand these forces of change?
Yeah. No, thanks, Dean. And, all compliments to Tomorrow Today, for introducing our company to the concept, to the landscape, if I could call it that. We have always been a company that believes in strategy, believes in strategic management, has rigorously conducted strategic planning every year, knowing that major changes in strategy generally suggest you got something wrong. So our strategy, very fortunately, has always been about refinements rather than step changes from year to year. So strategic management has been ingrained into our business. However, I think we did it like most businesses do it, where you do the traditional SWOT analysis, you scan the landscape, and of course you get stuck in a groove as a company when you don't have external influence from people that are, are professionals in this area. So our environmental scans, which are absolutely necessary in strategic planning, I think were very stale and were in a way very ordinary, although as a company we had done well. The introduction of the grey elephants was a quantum leap forward for our company, and you could get any smart group of people together to develop something new, and you can adopt it. But what appealed to us was the fundamentals that sat as the foundation to those grey elephants that, I'm assuming TomorrowToday did the work, did the research, and it was very compelling. To me, it embodied the way the world had moved, aging and pandemics, new concepts such as anti-fragility. But the grey elephants immediately struck a note with us as this is a higher order of environmental scan, which in our case was very easy to adopt because the foundational information that underpinned those grey elephants was really very good. So for us, it was a new chapter. It was a new start, building off a company which I believe, as I've said, embraced strategy. We took to it, like ducks to water, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. That was our experience of just seeing the team embrace it and use it as a very sort of visual and conceptual framework for thinking about how their strategy could be impacted through changes in the world. We've always liked to think about, the best way to predict the future is to actually create it. So understanding these grey elephants is a great way to think about your landscape and then to plot the course that your strategy will take you on. How did the grey elephant framing, did it help drive alignment within your executive team? Did it shift conversations? How did it impact thinking internally?
We've always been a team that is reasonably well aligned. We do value diversity of thought, and we embody concepts within our business, such as being a learning organization. But in terms of our own transition, remembering we had gone from a company that had inherited legacy gold assets, was just a mining company, mining some of the deepest gold mining resources in the world. We moved into PGMs. We had some foresight and a bit of luck in terms of a change in PGM market, got us into the clean air business and allowed us to expand. And we had started thinking about green metals or energy metals. And it was the perfect timing to introduce a new landscape. We had just gone through COVID. We had identified in a pandemic the opportunities that came with that, and I suppose without really realizing it, we had started becoming an anti-fragile organization. The grey elephants, as I say, resonated with us, underpinned many of the thoughts that we had, I suppose, developed without having a framework. We realized the energy transition was coming, getting to understand it as the angry planet. We had embodied, concepts such as superior value creation for all our stakeholders. All those grey elephants creating angry people, just fitted into the way we thought about communities, stakeholders, and so on. We had, as new kids on the block in PGMs, realized that supply chains had been neglected. And when we got to understand, the big squeezes, multipolarity, we were able to let's say, accelerate many of the issues we had sort of seen as differentiators. When you put the whole package together, it made sense. It created logic. It created a framework. It allowed us with confidence to continue down some of these paths and even accelerate and make them fundamental strategies. You know, if you look at geopolitics today, I think the exposure to the multipolarity grey elephant, if we had not through Tomorrow Today come to understand multipolarity the way it was presented as a grey elephant, we would only today be starting to say, well, we better decide whether we're going to produce critical metals either for the East or the West. We wouldn't have been positioned in Europe like we are today. We would have been 3 years behind the game. I would say that, we 3 years probably ahead of our competitors in thinking, and we've seen the value. We've actually been able to see tangible value that a shareholder looks for in terms of grants we've received from Europe for positioning ourselves and using multipolarity as the basis for assisting Europe. We've received incredible support from the US government. I would almost describe our business as a partnership with the US government. None of that, I think, would have been in place today if we had not, through the grey elephants, got to understand a higher level of the of the world context.
Yeah, that's fascinating insight. And you spoke about COVID, and it kind of takes me back a bit to when we developed the model. We were looking at the pandemic, and we're thinking, well, how do we help our clients navigate out of the pandemic? And we're doing loads of research, and lots of people at the time were saying that the pandemic or COVID was a black swan. I remember sort of smiling about this and thinking, no, it wasn't, because I've been talking about pandemics as a disruptive force for 10 years before COVID. And then we started looking at the trends, and we say, hang on, there are a number of other big forces that are being ignored. And these are big, high-impact forces, and they're converging, they're colliding. And we used to talk about it as the perfect storm, all of these fronts coming together and colliding. And people knew about them. As you said, people knew about inequality, they knew about aging, but the multipolarity is a really interesting one. If you were following what Putin and China have been doing over the last 2 decades, you can identify the strategies and where they are today as a result of their policies of multipolarity. So we were astounded, like, yes, they're the big forces and people are ignoring them. But these are the big forces that are really changing the world. And that's where the whole grey elephant model came into. I also remember at the time we were thinking of them as black rhinos. We started calling them the black rhinos. And then I started thinking, maybe they're the black elephants. And a friend said to me, why are you calling them black elephants? We don't have black elephants. And, why don't you call them grey elephants? And I was like, you're right. Yeah, grey elephants, and they're the elephants in the boardroom. These are the things that are there. They're big, they're scary. We hope someone else will find solutions for them. We ignore them, and then they start to stampede. And as you say, Neal, because you've been watching these grey elephants, what's happening on the geopolitical front is not a surprise for you. You've been implementing strategies over the last 3 years, which position you 3 years ahead of the competitors because you could see them coming. So, that's really great insight. One more question for you about grey elephants. They've proved, which ones that you've seen have proved most disruptive or influential in your strategy so far? Have any of them taken you by surprise in their speed and intensity? But which are the grey elephants?
Nothing's taken us by surprise since we have adopted the concepts of the grey elephants. Dean, we now talk about dancing with the grey elephants.
Brilliant.
We don't see it as a stampede. I can honestly tell you that the issue of tariffs out of the US were not a shock to us because, in a way, we had, through the grey elephants, being prepared for this increasing multipolarity. we had chosen our partners early on. I mean, we do use, to try and explain what I mean there is we say we are not contract miners for any part of the world. We are partners in supply chains, and we happen to have chosen the Western world as the area where we think we can create the most value for all our stakeholders. So none of that has been a surprise. And like I say, we talk about we're now dancing with the grey elephants. It hasn't become a threat. We're not afraid of what's in our way or what's coming, what the challenges are, because once you're aware of a challenge, if you're a dynamic organization, you will develop your risk management processes to deal with these challenges, which is what we've done. I mean, the issue of pandemics, I remember learning that pandemics are not just viral pandemics. You know, the invasion of the Ukraine in our business was the ex-pandemic that hit us, and it had very significant impacts, which we're still experiencing today on our supply chains, on PGM commodity prices, and so on. So the ones that I think have, to some extent, been the most informative up until now have really been the Angry Planet, and allowing us to be unique in our or developing the combination of metals that as a company, there's no other mining company that has the combination of PGMs and battery metals. And our purpose that was developed through, the next phase of strategic planning being, safeguarding global sustainability through our metals, just resonates so strongly with that particular grey elephant. As a lot of this discussion has been, multipolarity has allowed us to, probably 3 years ahead of what is obvious today, to position ourselves to benefit. I mean, none of these things we wish upon the world, but they are things that have happened. And if you're a company in the right space at the right time, and it's not just luck, there's benefits to your stakeholders. So multipolarity and the Angry Planet have been very informative in our strategic positioning. Yeah.
That's brilliant. I love the idea of dancing with the grey elephants. It's a fantastic image in my head. It's brilliant. So if you had one piece of advice for other CEOs about navigating change using the grey elephant model, what would it be?
To me, it would be keeping an open mind, understanding the grey elephants individually, not seeing them as threats. And I think, that was a learning from a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But developing a mindset as to how you can, with those grey elephants, how you can turn those into opportunities in your specific area of expertise or business. It is definitely a step up from traditional environmental scans, which of course we're all trying to get a lead on our competitors. So it's a wonderful model, and it encapsulates the existing environment so well. So that would be my advice.
Brilliant. Thanks, Neal. Yeah, I like the idea there of turning challenges into opportunities, and using those opportunities to forge ahead and gain competitive advantage. I think we both like the quote from Ayrton Senna, where he said, you can't overtake 15 cars in sunny weather, but you can when it's raining. And if you're prepared, if you understand those forces, you can really slingshot yourself past your competitors during really challenging times. So, I agree with you. Looking at them as opportunities to shape the future is a wonderful way to do that. My last question for you, Neal, is there a particular grey elephant, as you look towards the future, is there a particular grey elephant that keeps you up at night or gets you up in the morning?
Anyone listening to this discussion would realize that once you embrace the grey elephants, they should not keep you up at night, because once you've had enough time to assess them, understand the risks, understand the opportunities that come from those grey elephants, there are solutions. So no, let me say there's nothing that keeps me up at night related to our strategy. In terms of what gets me up in the morning is I think all the grey elephants, believe it or not. There are some that have been very informative, such as multipolarity and the Angry Planet, which have somewhat become obvious now. But I think embracing all the opportunities across all the aspects of the grey elephants, the pandemics, the squeezes, the angry people, having developed a strategy that these random high impact events you can deal with is nice in that you have a winning formula to probably do better than your competitors. So I think overall, as I said, the purpose of our company of safeguarding global sustainability through our metals is a really high purpose, and that gets all of us in Sibanye Stillwater out of bed every morning to make that difference.
Oh, that's fantastic, Neal. And I'm thrilled to hear from you that the grey elephants have made such a powerful impact within Sibanye Stillwater and driving your strategy forward and giving you the visibility and the foresight to navigate your challenging times. Been wonderful talking to you. Thanks so much for your time. Really, really enjoy speaking to you as always. And it's been a real privilege working with yourself and your leadership team and using the grey elephants model to really help a company get ahead. That's been great. So, Neal, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. And thank you to Tomorrow Today for what you've done for us as well. Thank you.
Dean, I really wish I had been at that interview. What a great interview. Neal's a fantastic guy. He's announced his retirement, I think, effective in September. But from what we know of him, he's not going to just disappear. I look forward to seeing what he does next, because that level of insight and passion, I'm sure, is going to find a home outside of Sibanye Stillwater after it. But my only response to that interview is that almost to be blushing a little bit, because it's just wonderful to hear one of our clients really talking about this idea that Dean, you and I had a number of years ago about these elephants, great grey elephants in the boardroom. And it's amazing to hear somebody saying that applying this in a deliberate and structured way, that he honestly reckons that, what was it, 3 years ahead of the competition just by applying this kind of thinking. So, thanks to Neal, and congratulations to his team for all the work they've done. And I hope that's true, that they are ahead of their competition.
It was a wonderful interview, and I really appreciate Neal taking the time to talk to our audience. I think for the next episode, it might be worth sharing with your audience about how we came up with the grey elephant sort of framework and our thinking around this, and what triggered or inspired this as a framework for thinking about how the world is changing. And this is about transformative change. It's not just about normal or everyday change. We see these 7 great grey elephants colliding, they're converging, they're colliding. And these are largely the reasons that we see all of this dramatic change that we're experiencing in the world around us. So understanding the grey elephants, as Neal shared, you can really think about how you're going to create a more positive future.
The final thought from me this month is that if a mining company digging metals out of the ground to make batteries. I mean, that's about as structured and I almost hesitate to say old-fashioned a business as you can imagine. If they can embrace the opportunity mindset that the elephants in the boardroom bring you, well, anybody can, right? And so hopefully everybody else was as inspired as I was by that interview. Thanks again, Neal. Sorry, Dean, back to you.
Graeme, I think this has been a really fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed learning more about your data points and sharing my data points. I mean, there's so many data points that we could bring to this podcast. You know, we could probably be here all day. I think if any of the audience listening, if you'd like us to talk about it, or you seeing a particular a weak signal that's starting to come over the horizon and could have a big disruptive impact, let us know about it, and we can share our insights and thoughts around this. But I want to thank Achilles, Achilles for sponsoring and allowing us to bring this podcast to our audience. Just a reminder that Achilles are a sustainable supply chain risk management company. And so if you're interested in the impact of change on your supply chain or your ESG strategy, make your way over to achilles.com and chat to them. A great bunch of people.
And wherever you are watching or listening to this, whatever platform you're on, please just like and subscribe. And if you've got a moment, it might as well give us a review as well, as long as it's a 5-star one. If you don't like this, just walk away. Never listen to us again. But if you think that other people would find this valuable, share it with your friends and colleagues, review us. And don't forget that there are some notes attached to this that will give you extra insights and some of those data points that we were talking about. From Dean and myself, thank you very much for joining us again. And we'll speak to you again next month.
Cheers, everyone.